Welcome to the Prison Professors Podcast. We serve people who face challenges with prosecution, sentencing, and prison. My co-founders are Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny. My name is Michael Santos. We create digital content, and our team offers individual consulting services. We also assist agencies that want to improve outcomes. To learn how we can help you, text the word PrisonPro to 44222. Again, text PrisonPro to 44222 and get our free brochure. You can also visit us at prisonprofessors.com or contact Justin at 818-424-2220. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Send confirmation that you reviewed our podcast, and we'll send you a free digital book. Stay tuned for a 20 to 30-minute episode of Prison Professors. Welcome to Prison Professors. My name is Michael Santos, and today I get to introduce you to Clarence Brown, who has an interesting story about going through a lengthy prison term, but coming back to actually work in prisons so that he could teach other people how their decisions inside lead to success outside. I want to welcome my new friend, Clarence Brown. Do you go by Clarence or Rudy?
Rudy.
Okay, so it's Rudy Brown. We just met today. Yeah. We connected because we both do some work in trying to inspire and educate people in prison, but Rudy has a different job, and he's going to be talking with us about that. But first, we're going to talk about his journey into the prison system. So, Rudy, what brought you into the criminal justice system?
Well, the drug culture in the 80s. If you remember, 80s, it was like a flood of drugs in our community. I just got home from the military, and it appeared everyone had money. So I got a job, and I just saw everybody in the street just with money, and it seemed like it was so easy, and people were approaching me with, hey, join in. So as a young man, I saw the glitter and the gold and wanted to get involved with the drug culture.
What city were you from?
I grew up in Pomona, California.
Did you have any problems as an at-risk youth or juvenile justice system before?
No problems. Preacher's kid. Just didn't go to school much. I just did enough to pass, and then went to the military, but came home, and no real issues.
So what happened when you made the choice? What did you start doing?
Well, first of all, just start sending drugs, connecting with people, because I was a cable TV contractor or installer at the time. So I started connecting with people, just trying to figure out how to get in the game. And then I met a person who was a big-time person while I was putting cable in his home. And we had mutual connections and friends, and that's how I got in, at least for a connect. But one of my coworkers was asking me, hey, let's sell drugs, let's send it out of state, I'll do all the work. And so I just started making connections. And so that's how I got in, because I felt like it was no risk to me.
Yeah, I made that same mistake. It didn't work out too well in my case. How about yours?
Yeah, it didn't work out too well. Yeah.
So you got caught. Did they arrest you? How did you get caught?
Well, it lasted about 6 years, and I went from sending 1 ounce of cocaine and across the country and to multiple kilos, considered a kingpin, considered with however money you had, however much money you had, I can get cocaine. And I went to trial, and I got caught, obviously, on the drug conspiracy out of Augusta, Georgia. And although I'm from California, my case was in Augusta, Georgia. And I went to trial and lost and got 21 years. It's first time nonviolent drug offender. When
you went to trial, tell me about the strategy you chose in hiring an attorney. Did you go with a federal defender, or did you hire a private attorney?
I had a private attorney from Beverly Hills.
So you hired an attorney in California to represent you in Georgia?
Yeah, that was a mistake too.
Yes, it was. It was the same mistake that I made. I hired an attorney in South Florida and brought that one to Seattle. What did it cost you to hire counsel that way?
Cash-wise?
Yep.
Very expensive. Very expensive.
Like north of $100,000.
Yeah, it was $140,000 easy.
Yeah, it's important for people to know that when they're going inside is how much it really costs to bring a case to trial. And also, I think another important lesson there, at least for me, is that I learned that if you're going to hire an attorney, you should get somebody local that knows the prosecutors and knows the judges and could advise us about what's going on in the local jurisdiction rather than somebody who's from a different state. That's my experience. How about yours?
That was exactly correct. It was told to us afterwards. You should have hired local counsel. Your lawyer's arrogant. He's a California guy. He's a criminal trial specialist. And he didn't do a bad job in the courtroom at all. But like you said, the people in Georgia didn't know him. They didn't care about him. And it was a mistake. Even though, we thought we had good strategy, they just disregarded us.
The other big mistake for me was that I knew I was guilty and I should have been working to get the best possible deal, but instead I was trying to continue living the illusion that I could get away with it. And because of that, I ended up getting a 45-year sentence instead of a much lower sentence, which I would have gotten if I would have accepted responsibility and moved on with my life. What do you see in retrospect?
Well, that's true for all cases, I believe, in the feds. But during that era, you have to remember, in many eras and in many cultures, if you make a deal with the feds, it's based on cooperation. And at that time, cooperation cost you your life. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't even an option because the organizations you deal with, there's no gray area. You tell, you die. You don't tell, you live.
How about just pleading guilty, just accepting responsibility and pleading guilty and not cooperating? Would that have been an option for you?
They didn't know. That was not even on the table. It was either you plead guilty with cooperation or go to trial. And that's the Fed's strategy many times, to get you to plead guilty to make a deal. But that wasn't an option for us. I hired a criminal trial specialist for a reason, to go to trial. And we could say it was a mistake. I got 21 years. I didn't get life. Mm-hmm. But, I felt like he did a good job, although now I know I should have got a local counsel. But there's no gray areas in it.
We live and learn. So were you held in pretrial detention the entire time?
No, I bailed out actually the same day from MDCLA. I was arrested at home in Pomona, California, taking MDCLA, and I bailed out the same day. So I fought mine from the street. But as I was convicted, when I was found guilty, they immediately arrested me and took me in, pending sentencing and sent me to another jail, or sending me to the system, I should say.
And so this was your first time in federal prison. Tell us a little bit about the mindset you had when you went. Tell us where you went and what mindset you had when you started.
Well, when I got convicted and arrested in Augusta, Georgia's federal courthouse, they sent me to a little county jail in Appleton, Georgia. It was just culture shock, just total culture shock, not knowing what to expect. But I was a little older. I wasn't a juvenile, a young 18-year-old. I've worked, been in the military, so I just kind of pictured it as being in a men's colony somewhere, or the military again. And that's what got me through it. And I just paid attention to the different realities of others and myself, and had a few fights, had a few challenges, but I made it through, just looking, listening, and learning to the culture of that jail.
Where did you go after the jail? What prison did you go to?
They first sent me to United States Penitentiary, Atlanta.
How long were you there?
I think I was in Atlanta maybe about 7 to 9 months.
And were you in the compound at that time?
Not long.
Okay.
I ended up back in the hole. And
tell us what type of decisions you made that influenced you going into the hole.
Fear. I guess you would say, to be truthful, fear, and the television, which teaches you got to be tough.
Okay.
And so instead of just listening and learning the culture, and being from California, I was kind of an odd fish. So that comes with challenges itself in the federal system. So I had to learn how to do time.
Uh-huh.
And bitterness, anger, fear, and just not knowing the system.
Right. So you chose friends that were from your geographical region? Was that your part of your initial adjustment?
Not really, but that's kind of part of what happens when you get out of the reception center, you might say, R&D. They'll tell you, hey, here are your buddies, there's your people. But I met quite a few people. And what happened, one of my co-defendants was there. And that was another reason why I ended up in the hole. I don't know how that slipped through the crack, but one of the guys that testified against me was there. So, because I had 12 people testify during trial. So I ended up spending most of it there before they shipped me to Florence, Colorado.
And what was your activity or your schedule while you were locked in the hole? Was the hole then in C block? Or I was in
yes. Yeah. Still it was, well, they would take you over to that, I guess was C block, and then I ended up going to
the new detention center?
Detention center before I left, yeah.
I started my journey in USP Atlanta back in 1987 in the just after the riots there, and I was there for about 7 or 8 years before I transferred out. But our paths didn't cross in Atlanta, so you were there in the hole for the entire 7 or 8 months. And what followed? Where did they send you?
I went to Florence, Colorado. Remember, those were new complexes at the time. Those were the compounds
I do remember.
They were building. And I was there.
But you were at the United States Penitentiary in Florence or the FCI?
FCI.
Okay, so I remember that prison also. I went there much later in my journey, but I was in the camp at Florence. What was your experience like at Florence?
Florence was where I really learned how to do time. I became a cook, and that's when I woke up. And I tell the story to my students. I was on lockdown during the 95 crack riots. I know you remember that, when the whole system went on rioting.
I do. It was right after the Million Man March.
Yes. And I ended up locked down after the riot, and I was reading the Constitution of the United States. And I read the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And when I read that, it said that, slavery nor involuntary servitude, except for a party who was basically duly convicted in the court of law, shall exist. So when I read that, a light bulb came on my head that said, first of all, I'm not a convict, I'm not an inmate, I'm a slave. And quite frankly, that's what woke me up. And at that time, something changed in my mind. And so I began to walk a new journey.
Tell us about that new walk.
Well, I started seeking spiritual freedom, education freedom, and I really, really got serious about changing my life. I stopped cussing. I started focusing on what we call today education-based incarceration, but I started really focusing on just becoming a new man, because I didn't want to be a slave. I didn't want to be a slave to the system, mental slave, or anything. And as I stated, the 13th Amendment said that's what I was, a slave. And so I was in this system of things, and voluntarily, quite frankly, because I'm the one who committed the crime. But that was where my journey began to change.
Tell us how education began to set you free from that bonds of slavery.
Well, I heard a person say the other day that I could see the world through the eyes of others by reading books. So I began to just read books. And then when the opportunity came to go to college, I was able to go get a college degree. And I came home from prison with 3 college degrees. And I have 5 today and working on my 6th.
Congratulations. That's quite impressive. I want to hear more about that, Clarence. How did you go from being in prison with the mindset of a convict to turning your mind around into education and getting involved in a college program that resulted in you getting your first degree? What was the steps that you took?
Well, as I transferred from jail to jail, I ended up at Taft Prison, in Taft, California. And they're a small city, so the college in Taft actually came into the prison and offered the opportunity for us to go to school. So that was my first time going to college. And they came in and offered AS degrees in business and AA in liberal arts and what have you. So I actually got my first AS degree in business in 2001.
So you were in about your 6th year of confinement at that time?
Yeah, something like that. But what I really wanted to say is, because of me going to school and reading that 13th Amendment and having a conversation with 2 guys similar to you, they were speaking to me in general English, talking, but speaking over my head. And when I walked away from that conversation, I tell people all the time, I felt so small, so insignificant, because I really didn't understand them. And that angered me. I was ashamed, embarrassed, because I really thought I was smart. I found out that I was pretty stupid. So that forced me to become an educated individual. It forced me to go to school, read books, never stop. And I think since 1999, I've been in school in some shape, form, or fashion, or some type of program ever since 1999.
That's a very funny story because it reminds me that the same motivation that happened to me. I was going through jail at the time. I wasn't yet convicted, or maybe I was convicted but not yet sentenced. And I remember some kind of way I had a conversation with a lawyer or somebody from the judicial system, and they used the word cynical. And I had no idea what it meant. And I remember going back and feeling that same sense of, geez, I'm so stupid. I don't even know how to talk English, and yes. I don't know words. And so then I read the book about Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, and his commitment to learning vocabulary and how it empowered him. And it just gave me an entirely new perspective, that the same that you described as education is what's going to set me free. And I'm so glad that you told me your story, because I think a lot of people who are listening to this podcast might be going into the prison system or actually be in prison, and they should be learning how they could use their time inside to start accelerating a pathway to liberation and opportunities. And certainly that's what it sounds like you did. So after you got your first associate's degree, tell us more. What inspired you to continue? How much farther did you want to go?
Well, I continued to go as far as I could. I took another 12 units, got an AA in liberal arts. Then I kept going to school because I was doing time. I had nothing else to do, and I didn't want to just hang around. So I began to get involved with the church. I began to go to school, encourage the young men, young gang members to go to school. We, me and a couple other guys, started a gang prevention intervention program. I didn't really start it, but I was a part of it. And a couple of those guys are very successful today on the street. And I just kept going as long as I could until my points dropped and I was sent to a camp. And I just kept getting units and units, taking strategic courses. And so I left there.
Wait 1 second there about the camp. You were obviously behaving in such a way that your adjustment, or the administrators were looking at your adjustment differently, because you started at a high-security United States penitentiary, and when you were in Atlanta, same time I was there, the New York Times had said it was the most violent federal prison in the nation. And yet you went from a United States penitentiary high to a medium in Florence to a low in Taft, and then to camps.
I skipped the jail. I went to Fort Worth, Texas before Taft.
Okay.
So after Florence, it was Fort Worth.
And that's a low, correct?
Yeah, it was a low as well. And then I went to, I was there a couple years, and then I went to Taft for 5 years.
But tell our audience a little bit about how your level of tension changed when you moved from a high security to a medium security to a low security to a camp. What was the difference in your adjustment as you experienced it, dropping from one security level to another?
Well, the penitentiary, obviously, it's, like you said, it was dangerous. And your mindset is, what am I doing here? Why am I here? I was a first-time nonviolent offender. So I'm very cautious, but I was learning how to mind my business and then end up in the hole, obviously, and transferred. And then as you went to the medium, actually, the medium wasn't any different at that time. I think because of the tension of the crack laws. Florence, Colorado really was no different. It's a lot of violence, a lot of stabbings, fights, riots. But most of it at that time was against staff. It wasn't against each other. And then when I went to the low, it was very much different, especially Fort Worth, Texas. All the relief in the world. No pressure. You really never ever seen a fight. I was pretty relaxed. And I went to Taft, the same thing. A few little skirmishes when we first opened, because it was a new facility. It had never been opened before.
And it wasn't a BOP facility. It was run by a private company. Yeah,
it was run by Wackenhut, which was kind of funny. It was really laxed. We wore our own clothes. We had our own tennis shoes and pants and hats. And that came to a screeching halt about 3 years into it, though, once a guy walked out of the visiting room in his own personal clothes and he escaped. But it was relaxing. And then going to a camp, it was, a whole nother world.
That's one of the things I try to impress upon people going into the system is how important your adjustment level is inside. The friends that you choose, the activities that you pursue are going to put you on a pathway that leads you to the hole, or perhaps keeps you out of the hole and advancing with educational degrees so that the time is working for you. But the reality is as you come lower in security levels, for me at least, and I was in a penitentiary for 7 or 8 years before I went to a medium for a few years, and then lows, and then camps. Every time I stepped down in security level, I felt like the weight of the world coming off my shoulders and the tension significantly dropped. So people should know that, because when I was in a penitentiary, I really didn't know that it was easier at lower security. I'd never been in prison, and it was just, they were all the same to me. And you certainly found out that education could, as you said, break the bonds of slavery and set you free, and you had an amazing journey. Tell us how earning several degrees in prison influenced your adjustment when you came home.
Well, like I stated, I was a little older, I suppose, when I went in. I wasn't 18. So when I did get my degrees and I started to understand it, opened my peripheral vision, you might say. I could see other things. I had no more tunnel vision. And I read the same autobiography of Malcolm X. And our stories are very similar in that regard. And I began to realize that education was my path to not just spiritual freedoms, but financial freedoms. And being free in the jail, and people may not understand that, but when you're mentally free, spiritually free, it's not about where you're housed. It's about the internal character and my thought process every day. And having those degrees and attaining those degrees, I knew that I would walk out of jail in a kind of an offensive position, not a defensive position. I would walk out in search of my vision, my dream, and not being told what I could and could not do. And quite frankly, I never liked to be told what to do anyway. So for me, the challenge was to show the world that once you're educated, anything's possible. And that jail didn't matter. Whether I was in prison or not, it didn't really matter, because the one felony I had, my education overshadowed that, because I came home with 3 degrees, which was kind of a conversation starter too. Because when I got out of prison, I tell people, I got 3 college degrees in prison. I'm like, what? Wait a minute, how'd that happen? So then they always ask me to speak to young people. And so it opened doors of opportunity, because it gave us a piece of conversation, and I was able to communicate with people who are PhDs, business people, kids on the street, so it really opened my eyes. And
it probably made it easier for your probation officer to see you as somebody who didn't just talk about being successful, but somebody who'd really put in a lot of work and opened up higher levels of liberty. At least that was the case for me. Tell us your experience of serving time on supervised release and on probation.
Well, I did the whole 5.5 years. I did 5 years complete on paper, and that was purposeful. But because I had such a high fine, so I refused to get off paper. But what was interesting, I was working as a job developer as my first job, and that was cool. She liked that. And my second job developer for a company called LA Works, which no longer exists. But they got a contract to go into the Los Angeles County jails to do life skills. And I wouldn't apply for the position because it said, had a great salary, but it said ex-felons need not apply. But my HR manager forced me to do it. She says, you need to be in this. And so I applied, and I was blessed to be hired. And I had to call her and say, hey, I called my probation officer and told her, hey, I have an opportunity to work around cops. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I've been offered a position in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I said, but you guys said I can't be around guns. I can't have contact with police. I can't be around other ex-felons. And she says, what time do they want you there? I'm going to take you. So so her response was, that's the best thing ever. You're educated. You're not just talking about it. Never got any trouble, no tickets. She never heard my name on the street. She encouraged me. She never came to the jail, any of the jails I worked in, to disturb my employment. She would meet me outside at lunch, stuff like that. She only came in like once just to walk through and didn't even tell anybody who she was.
That's
so
one of the
encouraged me.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things of being authentic and being 100% committed to success, is that people start to believe in you and they develop an interest in investing in you and helping you succeed. Whereas some people, if they're connecting with other felons, they get violated. The probation officers violate them and send them back to jail. When you're for real, like you were, Rudy, you find that you get a lot of support. It's just all about being 100% authentic, and that's the case when you're in prison and case managers are reviewing your file and determining whether to lower your security level. And it's also true when you come home and job opportunities open. You are certainly a model of that success, and certainly an inspiration to anybody who hears your story, including me. And I'm really grateful to you for sharing this. So you've been able to earn a living ever since serving it. You got out after serving a 21-year prison sentence. Is that right?
Yes. I started Cal State San Bernardino, ironically, with a grant program. I was a job developer for parolees. So that was my first opportunity to learn how to become a job developer. Then when that contract ended, I started working for LA Works, and then they got into the jail programs because another school district lost a contract. So they were actually just subbing for them, and it was an opportunity to do life skills. And after LA Works lost the contract, Five Keys Charter Schools, or Schools and Programs, took over the program. They absorbed us all.
So you became a full-time employee of Five Keys Charter Schools?
Oh, yeah. They absorbed me. I was already employed with LA Works, so they absorbed us when they lost the contract. And I moved to Los Angeles Men's Central Jail, and I've been actually working with them almost 7 years. And
how do the staff members, law enforcement, the law enforcement officers with whom you work every day, tell us how they receive you and how they interact with you, knowing that you were a man who was convicted of a felony and served multiple decades in federal prison?
You know, it varied. Some of them were really nasty. Some of the staff was really nasty towards me, and others, they I guess felt like EBI worked. Education-based incarceration work. This guy's an example of what can happen if you do the right thing. So there were some people who really understood that. And then others were like, he's still a convict. He's faking, So I had this, both sides of the fence.
But you've been out now for how many years?
Came home in 2009.
2009, so it's been almost 9 full years since you've been home.
And almost 8. October will be 8 years.
October will be 8 full years since you have been home and had a life of success and meaning and relevance. And now you're working with other people who are coming into the system. Tell us how they respond to you. Do they know about your background, and are they inspired by that, or do they talk with you about that, or what is it like working with people coming into the system?
Well, actually, it's very comfortable, and I tell everybody all the time, I'm used to being in jail, so I go to jail 5 days a week and I leave, and all the students know who I am. They call my name in the halls, Mr. Rudy. They use the word respect. They tell everyone we respect him because he understands. He's done what we've done. He's been where we've been. And I don't treat them badly. I know that some of them guys in the jails, the ladies and the men, they can be very mean-spirited. Some of them are habitual criminals, and some are very genuine about their transformation. And so I don't judge. I just teach them. I encourage them. And we sit around the classroom and we make choices. What are we going to do with today? And I never judge. I just show them what I've done. I use my credentials. I show them all the college degrees I have, all the certificates. And they want to mimic that in many regards. So, and I showed them that my education outweighed my felonies. And so they're encouraged by that. And so that's what I do every day.
That's why you're an inspiration to people, because you show them the best possible outcome, and that only happens if they make the right decisions while they're inside of a prison cell. The problem is that there's so much negativity in prisons around the country that it's hard to get that message. And one of the reasons that our team feels so passionately about bringing stories like yours, Rudy, into jails and prisons across the country and onto iTunes, so that people who are going into the system can learn and see that they don't have to be defined by the decisions they made at the worst time of their life, but rather how they responded to struggle. And you've certainly done that. Is there Is there anything that you see that could be helpful in communicating your message to people in jail and prison? What do you suppose will help them understand how their decisions inside can lead to success outside, besides sharing your story?
Well, I think they just have to understand that prison's not the end game. It's actually the beginning. And they have to want a transformational process. I don't like to use the word change because I think we can become chameleons and just change every day to survive. But I like the word transformation. So I talk to people about really transforming their life. You know, the caterpillar to the butterfly effect. I'm no longer the caterpillar. I am a butterfly now. So I want them to get that concept that you're right. Like you stated earlier, the choices you make in jail, the people you hang around, the books you read, the television programs you watch, your response, your body language, everything you do in there has an effect on your future and your release. So I teach them, don't respond to things that are not relevant to your success.
Thank you very much, Rudy, for sharing your story with us. I am Michael with Prison Professors, and on behalf of my two partners, Sean Hopwood and Justin Paperny, we thank you for listening and hope you find some inspiration in these episodes that we bring every day. We'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest, but if you have not yet subscribed to us on iTunes, please visit iTunes, subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you'd like more information on how we can help you, visit prisonprofessors.com or send a text message that says Prison Pro to 44222. We'll be back tomorrow with another inspiring guest. Thank you.